Alright everyone, it's time to start off the day with a little bit of a bang, which is that Mel Gibson, of course yesterday, announced, hey, I'm making Passion of the Christ 2. Now, for those of you that are, just old enough to remember the first Passion of the Christ, you were on the margins where maybe you were a teenager and so your family took you to the movie theater because it was like extremely R-rated, and they were going to ID people if they looked a little bit too young, considering how bloody and gory the movie was. If you remember Passion of the Christ 1, it was actually almost a religious experience in only the purest of American senses, which is everyone flocking to the theaters in enormous numbers to watch this absolute blockbuster, which essentially boils down to, hey, half the movie is Jesus constantly bleeding, suffering, and being beaten and everything over and over. That's basically what it boiled down to at many points within the movie. For instance, the beating scene, I can't remember how long it was, but I remember at the time because, the early YouTube, in the wake of Passion of the Christ, I saw it, I think it came out when I was 15 or 16, so I was, high school era, early on in high school, I think, or maybe 8th grade, something like that. When I first got onto YouTube, it was considered funny to remix, like the beating scene, and so you'd have like your personal Jesus, and this is before the dark days of DMCA, and you'd overlap that onto like a remix of the beating scene, but I don't know how long they beat him for in the movie. I think it was about 5 minutes of non-stop flogging with multiple weapons, and that was considered extreme, and it's just, one of the bloodiest movies ever made. It wasn't even a horror movie. Unless you happen to be like a Wiccan or something, then maybe it is. Oh shit, he resurrected, he respawned. So it'd be funny. But part two, the problem with Passion of the Christ was that fundamentally, other than making it really gory and over the top and hyper-realistic as it were, other than that, making it really gritty and bloody, everyone sort of already knew what was going to be in the movie because it's kind of a Bible story, a fairly well-known one. It's almost like Mel Gibson's like, I don't really need to write a script or anything, just sort of, say, lights, camera, action, okay, Jesus is going to get beaten for 5 minutes. With Passion of the Christ 2, considering it apparently takes place immediately after, sort of the interim before resurrection, between death and resurrection, and then, thereafter, I would assume to Pentecost, or maybe shortly thereafter, it'll probably end with some stirring scene post-Pentecost, where all of his acolytes are preparing to go off and preach Christ, and he'll be there up in the clouds waving at them, and something really over the top like that. That's probably how it'll end. It will probably involve, and this is why I will definitely watch it, Jesus in hell. Because if you read your Bible, you'll know, hey, Jesus spent several days in the grave, aka Sheol, then resurrects. He actually was by Christian standards in hell, I guess, fucking around with Satan at the time, bonking him on the face with a rock. He's like, fuck you. And then he's like, okay, bye. I'm going back to the world for a while. Then I'm going to ascend after. It's like he can't really decide where he wants to be. He's like, I got to check out a different abode once in a while. I need a change of atmosphere. I don't know. I'm kind of tongue-in-cheek, of course. I've actually, in a more literal sense, as a Christian, I've read through it. But it'll be interesting also. Here's the really funny part. Because there are differences between accounts, even within the Bible itself, the canonical sort of King James Version, since there are different accounts of certain events within that period of time, which version is going to be preferred? Are we talking about Passion of the Christ 2, the Book of Luke, or I don't know exactly what. I'm assuming it's going to be subtitled Jesus Goes to Hell, because that would be Mel Gibson's sense of ironic humor, maybe. Basically a big fuck you to everyone within Hollywood that for 10 years kept him from doing anything because he got drunk and ranted at a police officer, I think, once, and threw out a few slurs. And then it was like, well, Hollywood throws out slurs all the time about males, so, fuck you, and I've got the money to do this. I can actually get backing because nobody wants to turn down Passion 2. It's going to be interesting. For instance, when the tomb is open and, you've got resurrection going on, or I believe Lazarus. Are they going to cover the concept of Lazarus within this? Are they going to have two angels by the sepulcher, or is there one, or does it show up afterwards after an earthquake opens it up? But, you've got to think of these things. It's sort of like, in the movie, you'll remember, how does Judas die? He kills himself after being, I guess, tormented by demons. These little kids start like chasing him around, laughing maniacally, and they're all grotesque. And that was very funny. He's going nuts and he kills himself. In a different account, though, he doesn't kill himself. He's just walking along. He suddenly falls down and his guts explode everywhere. Like, I guess he was rotting from the inside. And then, of course, some people have tried to reconcile these by saying, oh, yeah, he hanged himself. And then when they cut down the body, it explodes everywhere. Well, it's not exactly what it says, at least in the modern translation. It's going to be interesting, therefore, to see exactly what's contained in Mel Gibson's interpretation of, the events, I would assume, again, roughly from the time he dies to after Pentecost to some degree. Is there going to be a Passion 3, the story of Paul? Or something? Are we going to get to see Paul persecuting Christians and beating people, and then he does a Constantine and says, oh, I want to be on their side now because, I think I can get more money out of doing that, which is basically what he was. Paul, the worst thing that happened to Christianity, turning it very legalistic. It was better before Paul, probably. Poor chucklehead. Didn't realize how many people he screwed over in the last 2,000 years, but it's going to be interesting. I'll watch it. I'll probably do a review of it. I'm actually very interested in stuff having to do with like the Bible, Christianity, Christian history as well, literature, and mysticism. I'm actually very interested in all of these things, which some people I don't think that they would classify me as the sort of person who'd be sitting there reading maybe some 100-year-old Christian mystic prayer book or watching Passion of the Christ. But it is, I think the most fun is anything involving Revelation. I'd like to see Mel Gibson make something like that. Because there have been some cheap sort of, Christian bookstore style attempts, low-budget attempts to do a comprehensive sort of Book of Revelation movie before. That's happened. And none of them were particularly well made as far as I saw. The best treatment of it comes from the History Channel, really, with its fixation there around 2012. For a few years before and after, everything was doomsday. It was just after the Hitler period and before the everything is aliens period, you have the sweet spot of doomsday. And of course, before that, you have actual historical documentaries. They were fixated on doomsday, and Revelation, of course, is like the ultimate big daddy of doomsday stories. I'd like to see Mel Gibson do a treatment of that and have, the big animatronic dragons and, weird shit. And it'd be all like really, really strung out. It'd be interesting to see how he would treat that too. But I'm looking forward to seeing Jesus and Satan having a conversation. Maybe they're going to have a gay tea party. Like Satan will be sitting there in a pink tutu. It's like, oh, Jesus, here, I brewed it just for you. And it'll be so funny because that's sort of sickness and hell territory. I don't think that Mel Gibson's mind is cracked to that point yet. That's about all. Peace out.